Welcome into the shop, everybody. In this video, we are going to be building a Dutch door. Now, I remodeled my house about 3 years ago and built a new door jamb with side lights for my patio, but never built a door. And so Simply Safe is sponsoring this video, and they sent me this really cool electronic lock, and it gave me a great reason to build this door I've always been wanting to build. My wife has also been pushing me for a while to build this. She's been very patient. So I'm finally getting it done. We're starting this project in the joinery phase. I've already milled all the parts. I have the rails and stiles, cut the length, cut the width. Everything's ready to go. And so I've been laying out what I call floating mortise and tenon. So I'm going to cut mortises in both the rails and the stiles and then add the tenon, which is the floating tenon, after the fact. So this will make more sense as we get further into the build. Now, this is going to get broken into two parts. This is going to be a lower door and an upper door because that's how a Dutch door works. You could build this all as one door and then cut it in half. But for me, I'm going to build it in two sections. So here I am using the plunge router with a 1/2 inch spiral upcut bit to cut the mortises. I'm just using a gauge, a fence on the side, and then I lay them all out and just cut inside my layout lines. Now you'll notice this one's off-centered. This is for the upper door. You could also call it a sash because it just holds a piece of glass. It's basically a window frame. And that off-center mortise will make more sense here as we get further into the video. Okay, so with all the mortises cut, I'm going to move over to my table saw. Now you'll notice that I am pretty much set up and ready to cut, and that's how I do a lot of my videos, but there's actually quite a bit of time that goes into setting up this cut. I have test pieces and do trial and error until I get the table saw dialed in exactly where I want it. You can see here I'm checking the cut here. I need to go a 1/2 inch back. This is basically going to be a rabbet. This is the sash or the upper door that we're working on with the off-centered mortise. So I set a sacrificial fence on my table saw fence and then use my cross-cut sled to cut these little tenons. And you can see here that mortise is off-center, but now it's centered on that tenon. So after I cut the tenons, I go in and cut a rabbet for the glass. I'll do this on all 4 pieces. And then right here, you're going to see, this is going to make sense on how this comes together as I test fit it. You can see how that frame works. And then we'll put a floating tenon, which I'm making right here. I make these out of oak. And then I use my round over bit on my router table to round the edges so they match the radius of the mortise. It doesn't make any sense to square those off, especially on ingrain. It's a lot of extra work. So this is much quicker just to round over my tenon material. Make sure that I get a good fit. I don't want this to be too tight because it creates a huge headache on the assembly, but I want it to be obviously tight enough to where I get a good glue joint. Okay, so with all that made, I'm going to go ahead and glue up the frame, and you'll see here how it all kind of comes together with that floating tenon, and then it drops on. And basically the reason I do that is it's making a window sash. It's making a rabbet in the back of this door that the window can just set in, and then I'll make glass stop and come back and nail that glass stop in once I install the glass. So I came back later in the evening to glue up the bottom frame. I think I hit that sash at the end of the day and went in and hung out with the kids and came back out. And so the difference here is that we just have a panel on this one as opposed to glass, and the panel centered in the frame where the sash is offset. Somehow I always make these panels too tight. I really had to fuss to get this door together. I always tell myself not to make the panel too tight, and somehow it always ends up tight. But I managed to get it together, and one of the important things here is you don't want to put too much glue that you get squeezed out into your panel, because then the panel can't float and move. This is one of my favorite parts, when you get that glue joint coming together and it squeezes out that glue. Okay, so after the glue dries, I'm fortunate to have the wide belt. I'll run these through. Start with an 80 grit and then do probably 2 or 3 passes to level and flatten both frames, and then I'll put in my 120 grit. If I was using nice wood and staining this or putting a clear coat, I would go all the way to a 150 grit. But since I'm going to paint this door, I can finish off at 120 grit. The wide belt is a huge advantage. Before I had this, I would use a hand plane and a belt sander and probably spend a couple hours getting the doors nice and flat and trued up. So I lay it out on my workbench to get a feel for it. I always, when you build doors, you always want to lay out your hinge setup. So this is a right-hand open-end door. So I'm marking where my hinges will be, and then I always bevel the non-hinge side. So I put a 1 degree bevel on the opposite side of the hinges. Okay, so while we're cutting this door to width, let me tell you a little bit about Simply Safe, who's sponsoring the video. Now, I've been working with them for over a year. They've been protecting both my house and my shop from theft, fire, water damage, and freeze. It's a 24/7 monitoring system and has 3.5 faster police dispatch. Now, the system sets up with all the different components that they send you. You have entry point monitors, you have glass break monitors, you have motion detectors, fire detector, and it all works off a home base and a keypad. So it's super easy to set up all the system. It all integrates through your keypad. Now they also sent me a front door camera that detects motion. So anytime someone pulls up to my house or walks up to my front door, I get a notification on my app that says the camera has detected motion. Now the lock that they sent is equally as cool as this camera. The big problem Emily and I have is we don't really lock our house very well. And so I've learned that most break-ins happen on unlocked entry points, which is exactly what we have in our house. So this new lock solves that problem. If we leave the house and we forget to lock it, all we have to do is use our smartphone to lock it. There's also a keypad that allows you to lock it or unlock it. And my funnest part about it was tricking my kids into thinking they had magical powers by using the app. I got a real kick out of that, and I think they really enjoyed it. The great thing about all this is Simply Safe is having one of their biggest sales of the year right now. You can protect your home, but you better hurry because it ends on Cyber Monday. So there's a link in the description. It is simplysafe.com/Andy Rawls. I would highly recommend you go down there, get your system, and protect your house. I've been using it for over a year, and I am super happy with it, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. So I suggest you guys take advantage of the sale, head down, click the link, and go get your system. Okay, so obviously we just cut the bottom section and the top section of the door to width. I want to make sure they're the exact same width. Like as I mentioned, we are putting a 1.5 degree bevel, and that just helps the door close because the tolerances are kind of tight. Keeps the edge of the door from hitting. So once I set up and cut the width, the next thing I'm going to do is cut the length where the two doors meet in the middle. I want to cut that first and make sure I dial that in and then come back and cut the door to length. That's just a safe play. If I make a mistake and if the door gets too short, there's no going back. Obviously, you can't stretch wood, and I can't make the door jamb smaller because it's already installed. So I want to make sure I get this dialed in, and then I'll set it all up and cut the door to length. So I'm cutting the middle section of the sash here, just using a track saw. That's the best way to cut things to length. These are too big to get an accurate cut on my table saw. Everything needs to be square and true, and I can do that real easily with a track saw. So once I have that cut, I want to cut the rabbet where the two doors meet. This is going to be half the thickness of the door plus about 1/8. So I want to give a little room for a seal. And I'll cut that rabbet on each door so they mate and match perfectly. Again, I'm just using a plunge router with an upcut spiral bit and my fence riding on the edge. It's a little tricky there when you get to the end of the cut because it wants to ride off on you, so you have to kind of hold on and concentrate on that section. So once I have those cut, I'm going to test fit it together, get the gap I want. I'm aiming for about 3/32, a heavy 1/16 of an inch of a gap here, and then I'll measure for length and cut everything to length and make sure that I have the right length of my door. When I build doors, I will leave a 1/2 inch on the bottom for the door seal and then an 1/8 inch gap on top. So again, we just use the track saw. I have the blue tape on the door because I actually spilled my compressor, tipped over in the back of my truck and spilled compressor oil all over this track, and it has foam on the bottom and it just absorbed all that oil. So every time I put it on wood, it transfers onto the wood. So now I get to tape everything until I fix the track. So with the door cut to length, I now need the hinge pockets I already have the jamb hinge pocketed, so I just transfer those numbers onto my door. I have a jig pre-made that I use with a router bit that has a top bearing. So these are 4-inch hinges, and there's 4 pockets to cut, 2 on each door. And I go back and square them off because these are square hinges, and it's real quick work with a chisel. I spent 3 years making doors before I started my business. We made really high-end custom doors, so I really have a lot of experience at door making. Although it's been a while since I've made a door, I was surprised at how well this process went. Now I've primed the door, as you can tell, it's just got primer on it, and I'm going to go ahead and bore for the lock and latch. As you know, standard cut for this is a 2 1/8 hole bore hole. One design feature on this door is I have very narrow stiles, if you haven't already noticed that, and it's going to become very obvious once I bore for this hardware. Typically you would have a 4.5 to 5 inch wide stile with a 2 3/8 inch back set for your lock. Since my stiles are a little under 4 inches, I had to go with a custom 2-inch back set latch that I actually ordered from a mom and pop shop called Killian's Hardware in Pittsburgh, of all places. Very thankful for them for hooking me up with that. It was not easy to find. That latch worked with my Intech hardware. So close to getting that done. So I come back now with 2 1/8 hole drilled, and then drill a 1-inch hole that goes in. That's where the latch will ride through. I use a 1-inch Forstner bit for that. And I'm actually, because again this style is so narrow, I'm having to come back through where the glass would be to give a little bit of extra room for that latch to reach, because it went just past that hole a little bit. And so I'll put the latch in, trace the plate, and then come back with a small palm handheld router and a flush trimming bit to take out that waste, and then chisel it from there. So a quick test fit to make sure it sits flush and it's all good. I didn't film a lot of the painting in this video. I really dislike painting a lot. It makes me kind of grumpy actually. So I sprayed the interior with a white oil based and then paint, and then I let that dry, and then I flipped it and taped it off and sprayed the outside with this kind of bluish latex exterior paint. Obviously my wife picked this color, same color as our front door. Spraying it's the easiest way to do it, but again I hate doing it because it's messy and I don't like messing with it. Okay, so the first thing to do is to take off this ugly old door. You're going to hear quite a bit of noise in this part of the video because obviously you're in my house and I got 3 little kids and it's kind of crazy. So we start off by hanging the lower door. Pretty simple and straightforward. I just want to get it hung and check the fit. You gotta be really careful with screws on these hinges. This is a fairly soft wood in that it's poplar and maple, but if you're dealing with a hard wood, you could break those off, and it is a mess once you break one off in the hinge. It creates a lot of headaches. So far so good. It closed, it didn't hit, all is good, and obviously June approves. Still see you though. So now we're going to put on the sash or the top section of the door. It's going to hold glass. Now you're not going to see the glass go in because it's 1/2 inch insulated. I ordered it 4.5 weeks ago and it still hasn't showed up. So if you want to see it finished with glass, it should be up there very soon on my Instagram. So go over there and follow me. Here I am being a total klutz, dropping my drill everywhere. It's never easy to hang a door by yourself. It's actually a little bit easier when it's 2 parts like this. It's not quite as heavy. But yeah, it's a little tricky. Alright, so it's a little bit off, you can tell. And obviously I don't want to be too perfect here, but I have a tendency to be that way. When you opened it all the way, it did rub and hit here. So there's a lot going on. It took some head scratching, but I made an adjustment on a hinge pocket to actually tilt that bottom door down and open up that gap. So what I'm doing is just chiseling out the back side of the hinge so that the hinge goes further towards the door stop. Now the problem with this is when you move the hinge further back, your screw holes don't line up. So if you hit the same screw holes, you're just going to put the hinge right back where it was. So I go old school there and just shove a bunch of wood in the screw holes and break it off. There's probably a better technique, but anyone who's done carpentry work is probably guilty of just breaking off some wood in the hinge hole and retooling the hole, and it actually worked. So to my surprise, the gap is perfect. Couldn't have worked out any better, and it stays that way the whole way, all the way to where it closes. Which, yeah, I really feel like I got lucky on that. Okay, so that's it. I think it came out looking pretty good. It was a pretty tough build. It took a little while, but I hope you guys learned something about door making in the process. I'm not sure if the Dutch door really has much of a purpose for me. I don't know how we'll use it, but I think it's cool. I think it was fun to build. There's a few things I need to do to finish it off. I need to touch up the paint on the door edge, and then I need to work on that seal where those 2 doors meet. And then obviously we got to put glass in it. The glass people are telling me the glass should be here this week. So go over to my Instagram, follow me, and you can see completed photos of the whole door. A couple things I want to touch on first. Obviously it's Black Friday coming up, so everyone's trying to sell you something. I'm going to do the same. I've got merchandise. We've got hats, a bunch of cool t-shirts. So if you're interested in some of my merchandise at a discount, you should head over there and help support the channel. Get yourself a t-shirt or a hat. Also, a few videos back, I hinted on a pretty big build for 2020. A little bit out of my wheelhouse and out of the channel's wheelhouse, but something I'm really excited about, and that is going to happen. I have what I need sitting right outside the shop. So be on the lookout. Some cool stuff is coming your way. Thanks again to Simply Safe for sponsoring the video. Love having their security systems. Thank you guys for watching very much. I hope you guys have an awesome Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next time.